I'm Jim Scarrett.
And how many years young are you?
Well, today happens to be my birthday. It's my 79th.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So what are the dates that you served?
Well, I went on active duty in October of 1968, and then I was discharged in October of 1971. So I did a total of 3 years.
Tell me about October 1968. What happened?
Well, October 68, I had graduated from the University of Minnesota. I had gone through the ROTC program, so I ended up with a commission late summer of 1968, and then I had orders to report to Fort Belvoir, Virginia for the Engineer Officer Basic course starting in October. And that was my official date where I entered active duty. I had originally had orders for the Fort Irwin, California, and a 2-year obligation from ROTC. And I learned from research that Fort Irwin was out in the middle of the desert near Barstow, California. There was nothing but armor units out there. At that time, we all knew that our second year of active duty would be spent in Vietnam. And with an armor unit and in Vietnam, about the only thing I could visualize was sweeping minefields ahead of those tanks. And while I was at Fort Belvoir, they offered a program called Voluntary Indefinite, VolIndef for short. It was a program where they wanted to get you to extend for an indefinite period of time in exchange for a change in orders, give you an assignment of your choice. So I looked into that and I thought, well, you had to volunteer for at least a year of additional duty, and if nothing else happened, you would be discharged at the end of that 1 year. Well, Nance, my wife, and I, we were scheduled to be married in December. As soon as I got done with the Engineer Officer Basic course, I was going to go home, had 2 weeks of leave, we'd get married, and then we would go wherever I was to go. And there were no officer, or there were no dependent quarters authorized at Fort Irwin for people that were going to be there less than a year, which I expected to be. It was a short tour assignment, as they called it. And we didn't really want to start our married life apart, so I thought it'd be nice to go to Europe. And U.S. Army had a lot of positions available there. And I ended up signing up and going VolIndef, taking on that additional year, so I had 3 years of active duty in exchange for an assignment in Germany for my first 2 years. So that was the start of it, and I ended up going to Germany, where I served as a post engineer for about a year and a half. A position that would normally be occupied by a major, a field grade officer, a major, and I was going over there as second lieutenant. So it was quite an experience, but we really enjoyed Germany, and after that assignment was complete, then I ended up getting orders for Vietnam. And so I instead of going over to Vietnam as a lieutenant, sweeping minefields in front of those tanks, I went over to Vietnam as a captain and had a construction background associated with it, having served as a post engineer. So in Vietnam, I was assigned to the 577th Engineer Battalion, which was in building roads and bridges in the highlands west of Cam Ranh Bay. So that's what I did the rest of my year in Vietnam. I spent 7 months as a company commander of a unit that was building roads and bridges up in the highlands, and then the rest of my year was spent as the battalion operations officer, what they call the S3. And we had a new battalion commander that came in and rotated the officers, so to speak. So that's when I left becoming a company commander, or being a company commander, and he assigned me the S3 job. So, and that was quite a challenge. I mean, coordinating the operations of 3 line companies and all supplies and everything else. So we I enjoyed that position. Time went by really fast, and I ended up spending my full year up there and on top of a mountain as a result of it. So, but I decided not to stay in the Army, so when I got back, I was discharged, and it would have been in October of '71. And I flew home late one evening. We were living in, Nance was living in the Twin Cities. My parents lived in the Twin Cities, and so I flew home, and you hear about all these welcomings, where they weren't so friendly. Well, mine was pretty friendly. It was just me on the plane, the only military person on the plane anyway. And when I got off, it was like 11:30 at night, so everybody else was pretty much gone, and it was just my wife and my parents, and then my sister and her husband were visiting at the time, so they were there as well. So it was really a nice welcoming home. Well, my experience overall in the military was very positive. It was pretty much career oriented from that standpoint. I thought very seriously about staying in and doing a full 20 or 30 years in the military. But at that time, particularly in Vietnam, there were just a lot of troubles in the Army. They were having trouble with drugs and the racial problems and things like that. And I just didn't think I wanted to get in the middle of that. Well, I didn't like the way the military was handling it, particularly the drug issue. They were more interested in keeping people in place over there in Vietnam in particular. They would allow people to extend and re-enlist that probably had no business being that way. It would have been better for them to come back to the States, deal with their drug problem, rather than stay in Vietnam and perpetuate it.
Where was your wife during all of this time?
Well, when we got back from Germany, of course she was with me in Germany, and then we had 30 days of leave, and so we rented an apartment in Minneapolis. And she found a job in the dental field. She was a dental assistant. And she found a job working in the dental field. And so when I left for Vietnam, she was working, and we had a place to live there. So when I got out, I came back there. And then I found a job working with a consulting engineer in St. Paul, Minnesota. And then we stayed in the Twin Cities until 1978 when we moved to Bismarck. And I was moved by the company that I was working for. They had set up an office in Bismarck. The oil industry was causing a boom back in the late 70s, and they thought it would be a good place to be. They knew I was from North Dakota, so they offered me the opportunity to come out here and run the office.
Tell me about any remarkable construction projects that you accomplished while you were in Vietnam. And lack of supplies and just getting stuff there.
When I was company commander, it was Delta Company or D Company, and our mission was widening and paving of a mountain pass. There was a highway that came west from the coast in Vietnam, from Phan Rang, which was a big Air Force base. It came west to the foothills and then came up the side of the mountains, one switchback after another till we got to the top, and then it turned into a different highway number and it went down to Saigon. So it was really the only inland route to Saigon, from Phan Rang or from Cam Ranh Bay, which are large seaports. So, and Saigon at the time was the capital of South Vietnam. So there was a lot of need for that, and going up and down the side of the mountain involved a lot of earthwork where we had to cut back into the mountain and widen the road out. One of those cuts, I can still remember, it was called Duc Me, was the area, D-U-C-M-E, a Vietnamese term. In any event, it turned out to be the largest earth-moving project ever undertaken by the U.S. military in South Vietnam during the war. And our little company was in charge of it. So we moved dirt, a lot of dirt, and actually moved that highway right back into the mountain. Took a slice out of the mountain and moved it down and it was quite an undertaking.
Can you imagine being a local there, watching that mountain be reconstructed or
Well, the
deconstructed?
locals in the mountain were people referred to as the Montagnard people. They were a different class of people from the regular South Vietnamese. And they were more or less discriminated against by the South Vietnamese. There was racial discrimination there. And we hired a lot of those Montagnard people to work on our work crews. We'd hire, dozens of them every day. They would come into our base, and the guys that were running the work crews or military people, we would hire them on a daily basis. We pay them about $2 a day, which was pretty good money in those days in that area. And so in the mountains, the people that were living in that area, the locals, were mostly Montagnards. So they were very friendly and very, very supportive. Our security, however, was provided by the South Vietnamese Army, because we were building a road that was very important to both the South Vietnamese nationals as well as the enemy. And so during the daytime, of course, it would be used for normal commerce, and then the nighttime it would be used for enemy movement. So we were under pressure to get the job done, and so the enemy would run a political campaign basically in the villages nearby, where they would try to impress the local village leaders not to support us, but they would do that from a political standpoint, but they wouldn't try to run us off the road. But periodically, we would take mortar attacks and things like that just so they could keep the pressure on us, and politically go to the local leaders and tell them, how easy it was for them to disrupt what we were doing. So it was kind of a tense situation there, but we made it through.
Unbelievable.
We couldn't leave any equipment or any materials out on the road overnight, because the South Vietnamese Army people would steal them. So we learned the hard way that if we were building a concrete retaining wall or something where it had reinforcing steel in it, we would weld all the bars together. So if they were going to take the steel, they'd have to take the whole setup. And then we learned to oil our concrete forms before night, because the Vietnamese, for some reason or other, wouldn't take the plywood forms that were oiled, because whatever they used it for, it was not suitable for that. So we learned some tricks, I guess, to avoid having materials and equipment stolen, which helped us become more efficient. Well, on the desk are a couple of medals that I earned while I was in Vietnam. The Army Commendation Medal, which is basically for just doing your job, I think. I got that, and I earned the Bronze Star in Vietnam for meritorious service primarily as a company commander of the Battalion S3 during the time I was there.
How about your pictures?
And the pictures, this is a picture of a group of officers, actually. They look like rowdies, but I'm in the corner here, and we had a hooch, as they call it, where we lived, and it was like it was a bunker, basically, that had several bedrooms around a common area. And this is in the common area, and these are the other fellows that were sharing the hooch with us. This picture was one that I had done over there and sent to my wife. We still had it in the trunk, so I pulled it out. I guess this is a hat that the 577th Engineer Battalion had a reunion several years ago. One of several reunions, actually, and you could buy hats and shirts and things like that. And of course, this is just a garrison hat that you wear with your not with your dress uniform, but not with your fatigues either. I forget what it's your khaki uniform, I guess. You wear with that. These are the certificates for the awards, and this is the Army Commendation Medal, and this is the Bronze Star.
Your service was incredible, and I just want to say thank you for your service
Thank you.
and coming and doing this story today. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
Keith Cleveland.
Middle initial?
Hey.
Oh, it is different than the rest of your family.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me the names of your kids, your wife again.
My wife was Hazel, and my daughter is Roberta. I had 3 sons, Randy, Rusty, and Rick.
How many years young are you?
I'm 86.
Okay.
Till next Saturday, I'll be 87.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I see in your papers here that your dates of service were 1953 to 1956. Is that correct?
True.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your time.
Well, when I went in, I had two older brothers. One was in the Marines, one was in the Navy, and they were both at Korea. The treaty had been signed already, but there was still war over there, and they were over there. And I was kind of like, I don't think my parents really deserved to have three sons. I went to infantry basic at Fort Riley, Kansas, and infantry were going right directly after basic, right directly to Korea. And I just didn't feel that was fair. I had a little short 5'6" platoon sergeant that had went through World War II as a parachutist with the 82nd Airborne. And he was always trying to recruit people. When you get out of basic, you got to go to Fort Benning and go to jump school, and that'll keep you out of Korea, you know. Well, so much for that. But anyway, I did. I signed up to go to Fort Benning, and I came home, and during World War, this was, you know, after World War II, but during World War II, I had cousins, brother-in-laws, uncles, many of the family in World War II. So my mother wrote a lot of letters, and I got home, and Ma goes like, "Why would they be sending you to Fort Benning, Georgia?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I don't have any control over what the Army does." And she goes, "Well, that's where them stupid guys jump out of airplanes on." And I kind of like, yeah, oh, really? You know, I didn't want her to know that that's what my plans were. But anyway, I did, and I made it. But I got stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and spent the next my whole term at Fort Bragg outside of, I flew to Japan one time. I didn't land in the airplane. We jumped out, and then they picked us up and took us to a barracks, Air Force facility where the airplane had landed, and we boarded the plane and flew back. And then in January of 1956, the government had never made a mass jump in the Arctic, so they decided to send about 600 of us up there. And I don't remember, probably 14, 15 different airplanes. We took trucks and jeeps and bulldozers, moved the snow and all that, you know. And we waited 5 weeks at Thule Air Force Base in Greenland. We waited 5 weeks just for a nice day. Now this is a dark season, and now it's, let's see, went up there in January, so it's the end of February, very close to March. But it's dark all the time. We never seen sunlight all the time we were up there. But anyway, then the weather changed, and we had a nice day. So from Greenland, we flew 600 more miles into the Arctic, and I crossed the Arctic Circle, which makes you a blue nose. You cross the equator, you're a tadpole. I'm sure you've heard that. Yeah. When you cross the equator, it, the whole your whole day changes. Up there it didn't. We were in the same time zone, but anyway, and we made this jump on solid ice. I mean, it froze over, and then we got together and came back. I finished out my career at Fort Bragg. I didn't ever get to go to a war, which I'm proud of serving, but I don't feel bad that I didn't get to a war. My brothers come back and they had their own war stories to tell, and that's fine.
I've never heard of jumps taking place on ice.
Believe it or not, we didn't either. They had never made, it takes, I don't know what religion you are, and that's your, you know, uh, if you're Catholic, you hear Mass a lot. Okay, there's two different versions of Mass. And if you use the numbers, Mass is anything above 12. A lot of people say, I never heard that before. Well, okay. They had done, of course, just a few people, but never like 600-700 people. And truthfully, what it amounted to was to find what the casualty list, how many would get lost. You want to remember, it's dark, and I was a parachute rigger, which means that I packed parachutes, and I also was qualified for jump master, which is the person that you make everybody line up and when the green light comes on, make sure they jump out of the airplane and don't turn around and go the other way. But anyway, me and a young guy in our plane were the jump masters up there, and we had the choice. We didn't have to jump. Your jump master, if it goes like, we were jumping 40 people at a time. So it was like you had to get them 40 people out in less than 25 seconds. And so then we'll come around and do it again, so that basically when they hit the ice, they're within a probably 10 or 12 mile radius. Well, anyway, we looked at each other and we were debating whether we should jump or not. And we decided to go. Well, now we're like miles from the rest of them. And it's dark. I mean, it's night up there. We started walking. Well, we know we come from that way, so we're walking that way. And we see all these lights. Oh, this is some little village. They didn't tell us there was going to be a little village out here. So we kept walking towards those lights. And believe it or not, it was not a village. It was these guys with the trucks. And, the closer we got, we realized, they're moving. They were looking for us. They could have just left us. And the average temperature, I got to get that out. The average temperature at that time, we didn't have wind chill. That was before wind chill, but 75 below. So we wouldn't have lasted, probably 8-10 hours, and we would have probably frozen to death.
How did the equipment not break down, and where did they park 14 planes? And
At Thule, they had to fly back to Thule Air Base, the planes, and then we brought enough trucks so that we drove back. And then I don't know how they kept this coordinated, but we were running out of fuel on the way back. And here from Thule, it was 600 miles up there. Here they had to send some fuel trucks to help us get back to Thule. Actually, it was probably between 24 and 30 hours before we got together and everybody was there. Believe it or not, I think it was 612, and everybody was counted for. It was, the Army the government normally isn't that accurate. I think we all know that. But we stuck together, had each other's back, and that's what it's all about.
I can't imagine the data that that jump provided the information.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it seems like it was kind of unheard of.
Yeah.
And in those days, I mean, look at the 1950s.
1956. Seven. It'll be. Well, it was 70 years ago that I went in. We had warm. That's one thing they did furnish was warm clothes, and the barracks we lived in at Thule were actually big containers. You know, containers that you see going down the railroad tracks on them railroad cars, and then very well insulated. I mean, we always had water. You know, we never had any problem with the stools not flushing and things like that. I mean, they had a pretty fair uh, had things together. They were prepared.
What'd your mom say when she found out?
Well, that's another story. When I got out of jump school, both my brothers were back and stateside. The oldest one was out, and the other one was just home on leave. So I took a leave at Christmas, and there was 10 kids in my family, and 1, 2, 3 of the older ones were married and had 1 or 2 children. But anyway, we had this long table. We had a huge kitchen, all with 10 kids, you do, and then with all the in-laws and the grandkids, you know. But anyway, Dad always sat way over there, and Ma sat here. And then, you know, the families lined up their families alongside. But anyway, Ma's like, gosh, you volunteered for that? And I said, yes. She goes, you know, I worried about my kids when they were at war, but I never give it a thought. What, you know, I never told them how cold it was up there until that day, probably, and how, you know, we could have been lost forever. I mean, a few more hours, and we'd have been road stiff. But anyway, it makes a good story. My kids like to hear it, and you know, then I after I got out, I kind of worked on road construction and learned how to run big equipment. I really liked trucking, so I went and I ended up with the Bobcat company over here. They were in Gwinner at that time. I went to work for them and stayed there till I retired.
Great.
This is a parachute badge. I got 49 jumps recorded. If I would have had 1 more, I would have became a senior jumper, which I would have had a star above it. But I only made 49, so I didn't qualify that. And then on the other side, I went to parachute maintenance school, and I got rigger wings. That means I can pack parachutes, I can load heavy drop loads. I also learned maintenance. We had sewing machines that we sewed the parachutes up if they were ripped and so forth. And some of those sewing machines we could sew 2x4s together. That's how big a needle and how strong it was, how much power it took for some of those straps that, like, for instance, when you drop a 1.5 truck, that takes 6 100-foot parachutes. A normal parachute that you use, personnel, is 32 feet. So a truck or a tank or a howitzer or any of them, they go to 100-foot chutes. And a truck takes 6 of them. And all 6 of them have to open at the same time. I mean, they have to open within a certain length of time so that the truck hits the ground and doesn't break all to pieces. But anyway, that's what I did. The only real school I went to. Outside, I did finish my GED in the service. so I could get a high school diploma because I went in before I graduated. But otherwise, I'm not much for medals. I had a good conduct medal. What was, I don't remember, commendation medal of some sort. But these are just ribbons from different years after Vietnam. That's when they really came to, the Vietnam guys really got the short end of the stick. The guys that went to Korea didn't get much outside of their paycheck, but the Vietnam guys really got it. That was nasty. I feel sorry for the Vietnam, and then they brought back different diseases, Agent Orange, and they weren't even ever aware of it over there. They were never told what they were getting into. But I came back and I got married in 1961. I was married for 57 years. My wife passed away in 2018. So I'm a bachelor again.
Keith, thank you for coming in and sharing your story. Congratulations on a long marriage, and thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing that story. That was wonderful to hear.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Ron Kraft, K-R-A-F-T.
Okay. And when did you serve?
I served from 1959 to 1965.
Okay. And which branch?
Navy.
Navy. How did you pick that branch?
A friend of mine graduated from school in 59, and he joined the Navy. And he wanted me to go with him on the buddy program. Back then they had what they called a buddy program.
What was that?
Well, you know, you would go through basic together and possibly get put in the same area, you know, like on the same ship, for an example, after you get through with your basic training. But that was not the case. But that was fine with me and him also. But we did serve through boot camp for 90 days together.
Where was boot camp at?
San Diego, California.
Did you get to have any fun?
Well, yes, we did. About halfway through, they loaded up a lot of the sailors and took us to Tijuana, Mexico. Back then, I'm sure now, maybe not today, but back then they did, which was a good thing. We got to have some fun, have some booze, you know. It was a good thing.
And I'm sure it wasn't that far away.
No, because Tijuana is right. You know, you can walk into Tijuana from San Diego. I mean, you know, the border there. But then we had to get back in the bus by midnight, which was fine. So we got to do quite a bit of things there, like liquor, you know. It was a good thing back then.
And I'm sure you did not drink any tequila.
I'm sure I did. I'm sure I did. I was 17 years old when I joined. Yeah. Took me about 2 weeks to persuade my dad to sign, because back then, you know, he had to sign for me.
Because you weren't 18.
Right.
How'd that go? How did that conversation go with your dad?
Well, I was his workhorse. I was the only son at home, and he did carpenter work, and he owned a bar besides that. And when he had to go out and do a job for two men, I was the other man. And And then we also rodeoed, him and I. We had horses, so I had to give up my horse, and that was it. You know, he signed for me. Away I went. August of '59. My someone took me to Bismarck, and then we got on the train. There was I don't know, I suppose about 9, 10 of us guys that had joined, and then we got on the train and headed to San Diego.
Not all 9 of you from North Dakota.
Yeah, I believe we were all from North Dakota. Yeah, yeah. One guy was 21. He was our liquor man. On the train, you know, they served liquor, you know. So Keith was his name. Nice fella, but he was 21 years old, and all the rest of us was 17 to 18 in there, you know. He was our best friend.
Quickly, I'm sure. Quickly became your best friend.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So after boot camp, then what was next?
Well, after boot camp, then I got orders to go aboard the USS Bennington, which was aircraft carrier, and that was in dry dock back then. Yeah, I don't know if you know what dry dock is or not, but anyway, it's right next to the ocean. They put the ship in this dry dock area, and then they let all the water out because she was getting a brand new paint job, and it took us about a year to do that. So I was right there for a year. Took all the paint off of her, inside and out, and then put on brand new red lead paint and then the gray. It took us a year to do that. We took it off with chip hammers, air guns, the whole ship. But there was when we went overseas, we had 3,500 sailors on there, so it was a big crew, you know, a lot of workers. But it took us almost a whole year to strip her down and put new paint on her.
I can't imagine that amount of surface area.
Well, she was as long as 3 football fields. But nowadays they're a lot longer than that. But anyway, we took all the paint off of her and put on all new stuff.
So was there scaffolding, or did you have harnesses, or what did you use?
Well, see, I worked on the hangar deck. That's where I worked, on the hangar deck. But they had scaffolding. I mean, you know, she was, you know, a lot of ship there, a lot of ship.
So you're in dry dock, then what?
Pardon?
You had a year in dry dock.
Yeah, it was close to that. It
and-
was almost 9 months to you know, in that area. It took us almost a year to get her stripped down and all new paint on her.
And then what came after that?
Then we sailed. Then we were scheduled to go overseas on a 9-month, well, longer than 9 months. They called it back then 9-month cruise. So then we filled it with water and sailed her out, and then we docked, you know, offshore until we got ready to go overseas. And I don't remember what time or what month we left, but anyway, it would have been in the beginning of '60. You know, maybe around August of '60 is when we sailed for Hawaii. We got to Hawaii first. That was our first stop. And we were there for, I don't know, you know, probably about a week. We docked there. And then we got to Liberty. You know, you have 2 different crews, you know, the whole ship don't get to go, you know, port one side and starboard the next, you know. And then from there we sailed over to Philippines. Lungapu, Philippines was our first stop. And we were there off and on. And we, from there, we went, like I say, we went to Japan and China. I don't know exactly what, it's been a long time. But anyway, we went to different countries, and China was one also.
Anything that really kind of sticks in your memory during this time?
No, it was well served. I mean, I enjoyed my time in the service, but seeing the different countries was interesting. And we had liberty. I mean, we had a lot of time off, and we also, when we went out to sea, we worked 12-hour shifts, 12 on and 12 off, until we came back into a port. So, I mean, it wasn't, we didn't have nothing to do on board, because we did maneuvers, all the while we were out to sea.
Like what? What kinds of maneuvers? What did you do?
Well, the planes, we got about the planes off, and they done, different approaches, landing on board the ship,
What was that like?
Well, like I say, I wasn't on the flight deck. I was on the hangar deck. I was an elevator operator and a plane pusher. But we got to, walk on the catwalks and watch some of the stuff going on. I mean, we weren't confined to an area, It was interesting. I enjoyed the service. I did. I was only on there for 2 years, and then when we came back to the States, I had orders, and then I went somewhere else. But I was on the carrier. That was my most important, best part of the Navy, was serving on board the USS Bennington.
Is that ship decommissioned now?
It was built back in the early 40s, so she was running her time out, and she had been repaired once before that already, and she's out of commission. They towed her down to what I heard, down to Africa, and melted her down. They didn't take her out to sea and sink her like they do some of them.
Do they? Is that what they do?
Some of them, yeah.
Mm.
But she served her purpose. And then when I got off of her, then she went one more cruise, I guess, overseas. And then when she came back, then she docked back in San Diego, I believe. And then they pulled her up to Washington, and they decommission them. They strip them down, take off all the asbestos, because there's a lot of that on them, and strip them down, and then they pulled her down somewhere. And we had movies on board ship, and we had entertainment, that kind, and we had boxing gloves. We boxed each other. If you were upset or something like that, you took it out on the next guy. So we got pretty good at that, and a lot of coffee breaks,
Was that hard to get used to life on a ship?
At first it was, because you're confined. You got a small compartment. your barracks is, there's maybe a dozen guys or more in a small area. I mean, it's you're confined, but you get used to it.
What do you think have been some of the biggest takeaways that you've learned from your military experience or from your time enlisted?
Well, you learn to get along. That's one thing, and you got, everybody's like a brother to you. Everybody watches the other guy's back, and I don't know, it was a good experience. I mean, like I say, I was 17 years old. I came off from a small town. Before that, we were farmers, so I mean, it was quite an experience.
You got to see the world.
Right, and that was a good part. The best part of it, seeing all these other countries.
Any other last words of advice or words of wisdom to anybody who might be considering time in the service or a military career?
Well, I've got a 17-year-old grandson. He's going to turn 18 now, and I've told him he don't know what he wants to do. And I told him when I was 17 years old, I was undecided, and I had a girlfriend that I was pretty heavy on. And the best part for me was to get out of town. And I joined the Navy, and I suggested to him, if he don't know what to do, to consider joining the Navy. In fact, he's a pretty smart kid. I told him he could become an officer, if he went to NAVCAD or something like that. And I'd promote that, but his mother says no.
Well, I want to thank you for taking some time today to share your story, and thank you for your service. And we just really appreciate it, and we look forward to pulling this project together. So,
okay.
All right. Thank you, Ron.
I brought you some pictures.
I want to see them.
I was going to bring a picture of the ship, but I didn't have one handy. But I did bring some. The flight deck and our planes.
Here.
They were prop jobs. Had helicopters. I didn't get into that, but that's fine. February 28th, 1961 is when the first shot was fired in Vietnam. And we were in Lungapu, Philippines. And they called us all back to the ship, and we sailed for the China Sea. And we done maneuvers out over there, and we discharged helicopters to the southern part of Vietnam. And then here's a picture of the most important person, naturally.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it brings back old memories, I'll tell you that. It's been, 63 years, something like that, since I was joined.
Thank you again, Ron.
You're welcome, you're welcome. I'm glad you had me.
Leonard A. Everding.
How old are you?
I will be 87 the 7th of June.
Oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of you that are having birthdays here coming up. So happy early birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, were you part of the honor flight?
I went.
Just recently?
Pardon me?
Did you get to go recently, or did you go?
No, I went 2 years ago in April.
So tell me about that experience. What was that like to be part of that honor flight? How was that?
Beautiful. My daughter was in charge. She did all the work in the airplane and on the buses, and Barb Linky, and she pushed me around in a wheelchair the whole time. So I had it made.
What was your favorite to see?
Well, change of guards. That was super.
1954 to 19...
59.
And then 1970 till 1991.
Yeah, 26 years. I joined the Army out of a sophomore in high school, 17 years old. I lived in Tappan, North Dakota, and I didn't like what was going on. So I went to the draft board and I volunteered for draft. And off to Fort Bragg. So I spent 2 years in the 18 Airborne Corps Artillery 240 atomic cannons. That's the biggest rifle that the Army makes. The 155, the 105, and the 240 atomic cannons for artillery for 2 years. And then I got out of there, and I said, I was 56. What am I going to do now? Well, no place to go to work. Went back and re-enlisted. So then I took 3 years at Fort Sheridan, Illinois, Chicago Gary Defense Underground, Ajax, Herc, and Zeus missiles. So I did that for 3 years. Then I got out and stayed out during Desert Storm, and then decided that I wanted to come back in again, so I joined back in 1970 in the 311th Evac Hospital out here for 21 years as motor sergeant. I took care of the troops. I went through a lot of officers, Colonel Brusso, Jacobson, Joe Johnson, Hillary, all kinds of, out of the hospital, you know. Dr. Perkovich, lady doctor, she was my my truck driver. Terry Brusso, you know him? He was my battery commander. Johala, you know, I had Johala, I had all of them, Colonel Johnson, Colonel Jacobson, I trained all them guys, you know, for different things. I've been there and done that. And I was stationed in Chicago. We had to go to Indiana and make a fishing hole for people coming back from the service just to have days off and relax and whatever. So I had to set up a place in there for people to make up their, you know, life and take a nice little fishing trip and stuff. So I did that for a year. They sent the people for coming back from Korea and stuff. I had to have a place to rejuvenate. We had to make a big place and fill it up with fish and stuff. So these people coming back and they had a big base there that was in Indiana. So we did that for a little bit.
So 17 years old, how did you break the news to your family?
I got in trouble in school. I've been in trouble all my life. And I said, I had enough of this here. So I came home and I told my dad, I'm going to the Army. He said, you're not old enough. I said, I'm going to Steele and volunteer for draft, and you have to sign it. Okay.
And he
Well,
signed
do
it.
what you want to do, he said. I'm not going to tell you what to do. That was the end of it. I walked out of the house, and that was the end of it. Never came back home again. I had nothing to do with, I was gone all the time. So by the time I got out of the Army and said my parents were all gone.
I'm assuming you were working in bunkers.
Yeah.
You were in bunkers. At any time, was there ever like your fear of, I'm down in this bunker and these are the weapons I'm working with? And...
Well, I'll tell you what, it was in a big parade field that had A, B, C, and D batteries all in a line. And they were all checking everybody out going by, you know. And I was standing at attention. And I was at Fort Bragg, and the nets were crazy. And one of them flew up in my mouth, and I did. And that sergeant came by and he said, "Soldier, did you kill that bug?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You see me after formation." I said, "Okay." After formation, I had to see him, had to dig a hole and bury a bug. We had a ceremony. So we did. We had to get the boys out and everything. We had a big ceremony. I had an entrenching tool, dug a hole and buried a bug. That's discipline. Yep. At that time, when I was at Fort Bragg, discipline was a little bit harder than the Army is today. They had them cadre people would come right up in your face and talk to you, and you'd spit all over your face. They didn't horse around with you. No. Then, and in Chicago, not in Chicago, but at Fort Bragg, we had prisoner chase. You know what prisoner chase is? We had to take prisoners out of the stockade and walk them around Fort Bragg and pick up all the cigarettes and paper. And you had to carry a shotgun with 3 shells. And you went to the prison, and they signed them people out, and you signed for 3 people, and you took them out for a walk. And you were responsible for those 3 soldiers. And if they got away from you, you could shoot them in the leg, and if you didn't haul them, you would pull their time till they got caught. Imagine that. So your job was to carry that shotgun and don't let them get away. That was what they called prisoner chase. The big stockade. It's a lot of work. You were in a Class A uniform, by the way, too. A lot of work. But you had you couldn't say no to anybody. You put you on that thing, you did what you were told. Article 15s were pretty easy to get.
Are there any sergeants or higher ups that really stand out for you?
Oh yeah. Terry Brusso was the best commander. We went on a convoy to Colorado for Fort Carson, and we had a flat tire in one of the big trucks. Of course, I was the motor sergeant. And I climbed up on the truck and I threw the tire out, and they changed it, and he said, "I want to know who that guy is up there." And I came back and they brought him over to me, and I had specialist stripes. He took them off and he gave me sergeant right on his stomach, right in the field. And I became an E6 right now. Terry Brusso. So I had a lot of memories, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of things. I know when I was in Fort Bragg and we were in the artillery, they fired guns all night long, and you would come out with a truckload of ammo. If they didn't use your ammo, you would sleep in that truck all night till they did. You would sit in there and you wouldn't leave that truck because you were in charge of that ammo and you were in charge of that truck. You couldn't leave it. You had to sit in that thing till they called, "Okay, you're next." And you sat right in there. Sometimes got pretty damn tired and sleepy and think you wish you wasn't there.
What did you do to stay awake?
Well, we couldn't smoke. Couldn't have no cigarettes. So we just sit there looking out the window and listening to the shells and banging and banging and banging and, you know. Yeah, we couldn't. And I went on a convoy one time at night, what they call black eyes, with just a park lights on, you know, on the big deuce and a halves, blackout lights. But I had a lady gunner. So we couldn't smoke cigarettes, but we could chew tobacco. So we had beech nut. So she got in and I said, no cigarettes in here, but you can chew beech nut. What's beech nut? I said, well, in this bag. And she took some in her mouth and said, so we were down in the convoy going through, they hit us with tear gas. So when they got tear gas, we had to put the gas masks on. She couldn't get her gas mask on. She was having trouble, so she swallowed the beech nut. She said, Sergeant, you son of a so-and-so, I'll never listen to you again in my life. She just about choked to death with it. Oh, that's one thing that happened. But she was okay. I mean, she got over it, but she didn't listen to me anymore. You know how I got in the airborne? It was raining. It was getting wet, and we were standing. All of a sudden, the sergeant come by and he said, anybody want to go airborne? You go over here. All the rest of you guys over here. I said, I'm getting out of here. I took off for that airborne bus. I had no idea what I was doing. So I ended up in Fort Bragg. But it's 80 degrees, and this was in November. I tell you what, I've been around. I did a lot of things, but we never took many pictures in them days. They had stuff like this, but they didn't have what you got nowadays. So the only time they ever took any picture of you, it was something going on, you know, big thing.
What are you most proud of?
Well, I don't know. I'm most proud of was when I was at 311 Tobacco Hospital, and I was in charge of the motor pool, and I took care of a lot of people coming and going, and sometimes I was tough on being here. Guys would come in for a drill on a weekend. Of course, they spent their night drinking, and they were out, and they come in with their fatigues not cleaned up, and their shoes not polished, and their hair not haircuts. So I had to be the guy to take care of them people, so I had to send them home with no pay. They got paid for morning and afternoon in the reserves, you know. And they'd come in there and I'd water pool, and I'm going, you didn't shine your shoes today. No, you didn't. You know, your fatigues are not pressed and clean. Then you need a haircut. Well, I said, you go over to the orderly room, and you see Mr. Colonel Brousseau. You tell him that the sergeant sent you. So they send them home. They get a haircut, and then they come back in. You won't get paid until you come back and you look like a soldier. So I was a meanie. That was one of the best things I ever did, but it was my job. I've been there and done that.
Tell me about your hat.
Oh, this is my first hat, and it was 6 7/8. It don't fit. So my head got bigger. But that's my first Army hat. And I've had it for a long time.
You think that's the hat on the picture?
Probably. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll tell you what. We were at Colorado Springs, Colorado, and we were out in the field in tents at night. It was cool by you know where that big mountain is in Colorado, the Pikes Peak. We were stationed below Pikes Peak, out in the field. Of course, the Army would set up a bunch of casualties. They put some guys out all over the place that were in trouble or breaking, falling apart, or shot or killed, and they give you a map, and you take this and you go find these people. It's a big area, very big area. So I walked up to come around a guy on a rock pile, And he was all fixed up with blood and stuff, looked like he was bleeding, and he had a big sore on his hand. And I said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" He said, "I just got bit by a rattlesnake." I said, "You did?" Well, how's that? He said, "I got his eggs. They're in my, I got him in this envelope here." I said, "You did?" Yeah. He brought the envelope and he opened it up and it went like that. Threw that damn thing up in the air. Scared the hell out of me. You know, oh, we had lots of fun, but we did that, all kinds of crazy stuff. The nice thing about it was when I was in the 311th and we went off to summer camps and I was a Sergeant E6, I could take my wife along and we could get a motel and I could sleep in a motel and I didn't have to stay in a barracks. And we was at Fort Fitzsimmons, Colorado, Amputee Center. I was stationed there. That's where all the amputee people came, and I had a job there. Well, I didn't have a job, but I had 4 drivers, and they would carry these specimens from Fort Fitzsimmons Medical Center to the hospital. And then I had 2 mechanics. One sergeant came to me and he said, "I need some people over in the motor pool." I said, "Oh, what do you need?" Well, he said, "I got civilians in there now." And he said, "They're not getting any work done. How about your boys who got mechanics?" I said, "I got 2 or 3. I'll send you 2 of them over." So I gave 2 of the mechanics to him. 2 days later, he said, "Sergeant, I want to see you." I said, "What?" He said, "You have to take your boys out of there. They're working and civilians out of a job." I said, "Okay." So I had to pull my boys back out because them civilians stood around, did nothing, and them other, because they were mechanics out here at the 311th, and they were mechanics at the city of Bismarck. So they knew their jobs, you know what I mean? And so I had to pull them out. And then I sent them to the Fitzsimmons, and they did air conditioning, refrigeration the rest of the time. Just checking things, you know. They had to have a job. But when I first got to Fitzsimmons, got off the bus, big color sergeant came to me. He said, "I'll take these troops right here." He said, "Which one are yours?" I said, "These right here." I said, "You won't take them because they are belonging to me, and I'll take them." When you mother so-and-so, he got mad, and you know what he called me. I said, "These are my boys. I'll get them someplace to work." So then I did. Next day, a week later, a couple of days I think, another sergeant came to me and he said, "We have an ambulance that needs an engine, and we have a pickup that's wrecked, and the engine is good, so they need to take that engine out of there and put it in an ambulance, so we got an ambulance." They're both Dodges. So I got my 2 mechanics, and I told them what I wanted done. They found them a space. 2 days later, they were driving that ambulance around, and that sergeant come to me and he said, "I can't figure you boys from North Dakota." He said, "I'd never seen such a bunch in my life." That's what the 311 boys did, and they did. So I was proud of them boys. They did.
Sounds like you had really good crews all the way around.
I did. Yeah, I was a motor sergeant for 20 years. And took care of a lot of stuff. Sometimes I did right, sometimes I didn't. But I made it.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you for coming in and sharing your story,
And you're okay.
and thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Tell me your name.
Dwayne Amon,
Where did you grow up?
Ashley, and the Wishikin area, sauerkraut country.
have never heard that, but I agree with you.
They have sauerkraut down there.
Yeah, I bet they do.
It's every fall,
Oh,
sauerkraut day.
I think they also have red eye.
Oh yeah. Hochzeit Schnaps.
Right?
Yes.
So, how many years young are you?
I'm going to be 85,
When's your birthday?
January.
85. Wow. Good for you, right? Yeah.
I got married in 62 because I thought I would not get drafted anymore. Well, or December of 62, I got the letter from the draft board that I got drafted.
And you were
In-
married how long?
I was married a year,
A year. Okay.
and the wife was expecting the first
Oh
child,
boy. How old were you?
23.
So boot camp was where?
Fort Ord, California.
Tell me about that.
It was nice. It was nice. The first 8 weeks I was out at boot camp at Fort Ord, I gained about 20 pounds. And we never rode in a truck or anything. We were always marching. We had a little Mexican platoon sergeant. He made us go walk everywhere we went. He was a great guy. I really enjoyed him.
So you must have put on 20 pounds of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So what happened after boot camp?
Boot camp, I come back, and then the wife went with me, and we went down to Lawton, Oklahoma, to Fort Sill, to where I took my advanced training for artillery. So I was there about 8 weeks. After that, I got shipped down to Fort Sill, or Fort Hood, Texas. That's where I got stationed then. I was with the Honest John rocket launcher. It's a big rocket that you put on a truck and then you wire it up and gets fired. I fired 3 of them in Korea when I was over there.
How long were you in Texas?
Just about a year. I was in Texas at Fort Hood when President Kennedy got shot in Dallas.
Tell me about that.
It was interesting. We got shipped out to the field for a week and a half while that was going on. And then we got to come back home. And in December of 64, I got my orders to go to Korea. And my wife was in Texas with me. And our oldest daughter was born at Temple, Texas. So I brought them home, and then I went to Oakland, California, where I got put on a ship to go to Korea.
So home to North Dakota? They went home to North Dakota.
Right.
Okay, got it.
They come back and they stayed at Wishick with their folks. So, and I left to go to Oakland, California to get on the ship and go over to Korea.
All right, tell me about that experience leaving California.
On the ship, I didn't like it. We went up on the USS Man, and that was an old ship. And we got out of Oakland about one day, and we ran into a storm. And 3/4 of the people got seasick. I lived on crackers from there until we got to Hawaii. So,
Did they give you any tips for how to kind of get your sea legs?
oh yeah.
What
Oh,
were
yeah.
their tips? What did they say?
Well, they had food every day for you. But you go into the mess hall to eat, you'd sit down and your tray was in front of you, but sometimes the tray would disappear on you. And meanwhile, there were 3 other ones that went by. So you never knew which one was yours after a while. So I got tired of that and I just started eating crackers. So, and it was rough. We run into a storm. We had to strap ourselves in our beds at night so that we wouldn't fall out of bed because the props would come out and vibrate. It was terrible. But we made it.
You made it.
Yeah.
How long was that trip?
About a week.
So
We got to Hawaii, and I got to spend my 24th birthday in Hawaii.
that's something to write home about.
No,
No.
because I don't remember much of it. Yeah.
You had a good time.
Oh, yes.
Good for
We
you.
had a good time. No, it was interesting. And after we left there, we went over to Korea and got off the ship, and I had run into a little sergeant down at Fort Hood. And he was leaving when I got there. He was leaving to go to Korea.
He was leaving Fort Hood to go to Korea? Okay.
Right. And he said, I hope you get to come to Korea, because he says, I'm going to be over there. I'm going to look for you. And he did find me. He took me up to his place, to his camp, and I was in his squad. And I got sent up to the north end of Korea, 2 miles from the DMZ, where I was stationed then for 10 months. I was there at Camp Snow.
So what was that sergeant's name?
Parcial. He's a little guy, and he was so dear to me, and he got me the rank I got when I got out. When I got over to Korea, I got promoted to Spec 4, and about 4 months later, I got promoted to E5. So,
Well, he obviously saw something special in you, and that's why he
oh yeah,
pulled you aside. And
I loved to drive the truck. It's the truck driver, and I stood beside it. Tires were as tall as I was. We went out in the field only in the winter time. Summertime we couldn't go out in the field because they had the rice paddies out. Spent the summer months at the camp.
well, I'm sure he recognized that you were a good farm boy from North Dakota.
Oh yeah.
All right. Knew how to run that
Yeah,
equipment.
he told me how to. We had to load this rocket from a trailer to my truck, and we usually did that at night. So I had to back up close enough to the loading dock
In the dark.
in the dark, no lights. But we made it.
Anything remarkable stand out for you during this time that you were in Korea?
I tried to call my wife on Christmas. I couldn't get through. I got about 5 letters in 11 months. That's it. She sent me cookies. I never got them. So it was a long, lonely year.
The communication was, I mean,
Terrible.
how often could you really call?
You could call, but there were no cell phones. And
And then to plan, how did you plan that out as far as like, well, I'm going to call you on this day at this time? You just
There's-
hope they were home.
you just hope, yeah. And she worked at the hospital in Wishick, so
Wow. And you had one child at that
one
time?
child.
Okay. And how old was it?
She was born 2 days before Halloween
Okay.
in Texas. So when I got back, she was 2. She didn't know who I
I'm
was.
sure. Yeah.
So
So then you came back from Korea. What was that like coming home?
terrible.
Why?
Why they treated us like we were garbage?
Was this in 69?
No, this was in 66, late 66.
So even though it was Korea, it was still.
Well, the Vietnam thing was going on already.
Yeah.
But they didn't care for us. We didn't get a celebration coming home. But that's maybe why they're trying to make us feel better now, which,
Do you feel like it?
no.
Not yet. No. Well,
I still think people thought we were garbage
oh,
when we come back.
I'm hearing this so much of this, and I really feel like it was just the culture at the time. There was so much counterculture going on with everything,
Mm-hmm.
and I think for many of you, you just ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's why I don't like to talk about
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
It upsets me.
Well, I want you to know that we genuinely, truly respect everything that you sacrificed, you and your wife, your kid, your everything, your family. We really do honestly appreciate your sacrifice. So,
This is something I'll probably remember the rest of my life.
I hope so. I hope so. I really do.
Because,
Yeah, we want to feature you like celebrities. We really do. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you went through that many of us just can't even
Right.
understand.
It's something that some of the guys will never see.
Absolutely.
And I was a little hesitant when I first found out about it. What, what
Yeah.
else are you going to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
I served my country.
You did. You did. Think about the life experiences that you did have. You could have never gained anyplace else.
Well, the camp I got assigned to, Camp Snow, a week before I got there. We had a guy that got shot in the guard tower from a North Korean that come across the line. Oh, and when I had to pull guard duty, that's one of the posts you had to go to. And the holes were still in the wood.
Sure, you were so thrilled to get back to see your wife and your daughter.
Yeah, you ain't kidding.
Did you get to do anything special with your family when you got back?
We went down to Colorado and saw her sister and her husband.
What things do you think that you did learn from the experience that you were able to take with you going forward?
I don't know. You realize that you have to worry about yourself. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Try and keep yourself going.
Yeah. Thank you again for your service. And
You're
thanks for
welcome.
coming in and doing this.
Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Have a great day and thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Paul Zent.
And where did you grow up at?
I grew up basically in Bismarck, for a while up in Riverdale, but always in North Dakota, but moved down here in '68 and lived in Bismarck, went to Northridge, used junior high, St. Mary's, BSC, and DSU.
So I see that your years of service were 1975 to 1999, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
About 25 years.
What was your branch?
It was engineering.
Okay. National Guard.
National Guard, and then a few years in the Army Reserve.
So 1975, tell me about what that looked like when you first, did you enlist?
I had been working part-time at the National Guard headquarters. Got signed up, started there when I was a junior in high school. Signed up within 6 months. Signed up in December of '75. Went to basic training in 1976 in South Carolina, and been with it since. At St. Mary's, the guy who works in the print shop there, who printed up orders and everything, he liked to hire St. Mary's high school kids because his three daughters went to St. Mary's. So I worked as a high school student and 2 years when I was a college student there.
At the time that you signed up, what did you envision to happen over the next several years?
Well, right out of high school, I wanted to join the Navy and become a nuclear submariner. And
How come?
I just thought that would be cool to cruise all around the world. I'm glad I didn't. My uncle talked me out of it. He said, why don't you take a year and grow up, get a little older, and then if you want to continue. Well, in that time, then I joined the National Guard, went to basic training. I think now with my claustrophobia, I could not do it.
That worked out in your favor.
Yeah. So it worked out good, and I was going to engineering school anyway, and they have engineering units in the North Dakota National Guard, so that's what I did. It fit really well. And several units, from Wahpeton to Fargo to Jamestown here in Bismarck, because you get reassigned and everything. So it worked out good. It was a good career.
So tell me again, boot camp was where?
Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
Okay, what
Right
was that
outside.
like, leaving North Dakota and going down to North
Oh,
Carolina?
I was the only one, and at that time they didn't have a program where you could spend like up to 6 weeks going to drill and kind of learning how to march, what the rank is, what weapons are, that type of thing. That's a good program that was started after I joined. Right, and then they go down as a group, so they kind of know each other. I went down by myself, got down there, got loaded up on the cattle trucks, sent to the basic training, and spent 3 days just getting orientated, and then got into a platoon and went through basic training, and then went to I did my MOS, which is their military operations school, find out what you did, and I knew I wanted to become an officer, so I just took something easy like admin specialist. So you had to learn to type, and I knew how to type, and you had to know forms and payroll and all that stuff. So I knew how to type 20 words per minute more than the regular people. So I was accelerated to the next class, so I didn't have to spend 2 weeks learning how to type. And with that, then I went through the class, and I got to be honor grad of the class. So I wasn't sure what that meant, except that one of our final formations, I went into, they said, Paul, you are ordered to go to the captain's office. So I went into the captain's office. It was pretty bare. He was sitting at his desk. There was a chair sitting in front of his desk, and there was a puppy sitting in his chair. And he looked at me and he said, take a seat. So I lifted up the puppy, sat down, put it on my lap. And he said, you know what you're here for? And I said, no, sir. And he said, that's because you're the honor grad, and now I have to promote you to PFC, which was a pretty big thing, which is an E3. He said, I see you're from North Dakota. Yes, sir. I'm from South Dakota. Oh, great. Where at? He told me. He said, okay, dismissed. So I stood up, put the puppy back on the chair, left. And then that evening at formation, I was promoted to PFC.
I'm sure you were like, what am I supposed to do with this puppy right now?
I don't know if it was a test or what, but you know me, I like dogs and I like animals, so it wasn't like get away. It was just what I'm going to. And he slept through the whole thing. It was just that small. It was going to be his hunting dog.
Wow. Tell me what happened then after that. What came next?
Came back and got assigned to a unit. And did that until I joined OCS, and then that was a 2-year program to become an officer. Once I became an officer, I was assigned to the Wahpeton unit. It was a maintenance platoon company, and I was the platoon leader, and that was fun. I was going to school at Fargo and NDSU, so it was a nice drive down on weekends to go down there for 2 years. We had summer camps up at Camp Grafton, and learned a lot. After that, then I was assigned to the Fargo unit, was there for a while. After a year or so, then I was assigned as a platoon leader at Jamestown, which was a combat engineer unit, and so we did missions with that. And then got to Bismarck with a unit, and then got kind of asked to join the Army Reserve, and that's when I joined this real estate detachment, which there's only 2 of them in the whole Army, and that's about the time that Desert Storm started up, and the Corps of Engineers, the civilians were over there securing properties for the war, the future war that they were expecting. And they kept saying, we're civilians, and when this goes to war, we're going to be leaving, so we need people here that knows what to do. So our unit got selected to mobilize over there, which we did. Went through Fort Carson, Colorado, and then got stationed over there in Daharan. Worked right with the Corps of Engineers, and learned how to go out and talk to people and get their properties and see what they wanted to do, as far as allowing units to come in and get leases. So we had agreements, and on the pages, half of it was in English and half of it was in Arabic, so that these people could read it also, and we could read it. We never signed anything. That was for higher headquarters that would do that, but we were out in the field talking to people, talking to landowners, and securing leases. And we were lucky because there was air superiority with the United States and our allies, so we never had to worry about anything, any airplanes flying over being dangerous or the enemy. Once the war started, and I remember watching jets taking off from the airport 2 at a time every 5 minutes to go up and bomb Iraq and that area up there, and that was pretty awesome. We did go through 21 Scud attacks, which was pretty scary when the Iraqis were shooting the Scuds, and we had communications back with the States, with our families, about 10 minutes a week to let them know how we were doing. And one of those Scud attacks did hit a building, and there was Army Reserve people in there. And actually, I should say it didn't hit the building, it hit the propane tank right next to the building, and that propane tank was like a bomb, and it destroyed the building. And there were some people killed. So at that point, we had someone call back right away and say, we're safe, it's not our reserve unit. So, but yeah, 21 Scud attacks was, the sirens go, and then you wait about 30 minutes, and then you'll hear the bomb of a Scud above you, and then you'll have things trickle down and on your cars or on your roof or something. Of course, we were all in shelters and stuff. So then we came back. That was good. I mean, Bismarck Airport was filled with people. There was people coming and kissing us and welcoming back, and then we were like heroes, which I guess we probably were, but we never considered ourselves that. We just did what we had to do and did our job for our country. So that was fun. And then I stayed in for a couple more years. Went down to Omaha and worked with the Corps of Engineers down there because they liked what I did, and had like 3 years with them down there. And then it was time to retire, so I got out as a major. That was basically it.
What was that like, the process of learning to work with the locals? What was that like?
It was pretty good. They could speak English, and of course they would speak Arabic when they wanted to keep something from you. But we were basically told before we went over there is that these guys are all professional and they don't want to talk about family or anything personal type of thing. And we got over there and it was totally different. They wanted to know as much about us as we wanted to know about them. So there were some friendships that were made over there. Working with the Saudi soldiers were good. Dealing with the landowners, the property owners. They got to the point where they would invite us to their homes and allow us to have lunch or dinner with them. I remember my birthday was in December, and one of my friends that I got to know pretty well, he came and picked me up from our office, and he said, "You're coming with me," and I didn't know what that was about. And he took me to his home, and his wife was there and his 3 kids, and they had a birthday lunch for me, and it was fantastic. I said, "How'd you know it was my birthday?" And he said, we have ways of finding out things. So that's how I spent my birthday over there, was having lunch with him and his family. And of course, the women all wear black and the veils, but inside their houses they don't wear that. They can wear regular clothes. So yeah, friendships were made real easy. They were friendly to deal with, and we went to other people's homes where they would pick a goat out from their herd and butcher it that night, and we'd have goat that night with rice, dates. Dates were fantastic over there. I mean, they were huge, and they're not like here all shriveled up. They were fantastic. So yeah, we had quite a few meals that they would invite us to, and we would bring them some MREs once in a while that we had stored up, and they thought they were pretty good. MREs are the meals ready to eat, of course, in the round packages. So
Were they any good?
some were, some weren't. Yeah, some, spaghetti and that type of stuff was fare. Chicken a la king wasn't all that great, but some were good, but some were like dry dog biscuits that you put in hot water, and then they grow up to, swell up to be like a hamburger, and they're still crunchy. Yeah, it was fun.
Paul, I can see you making friends anywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You could go anywhere and make friends. Yeah. Did you stay in touch with any of these?
I did for a while, and then we kind of just lost contact. We always heard that they could have up to 4 wives. And sometimes I would talk to them about that. Most of them said, "I can't afford 4 wives." But one guy could, and when we got invited to his house, his 4th wife was there, and she was quite a bit younger than he was. Very attractive. And she prepared all the food and served us and everything. But it was interesting is, once they get married and they have a second wife, they decide to have a second wife for whatever reason, that first wife picks the second, not the husband. Because she's the one that has to live with them. The husband's out doing business. The second wife and first wife then pick a third one if they decide they can do that, and same with that. So it's not like it's up to the guy that's going to pick somebody he's interested in. It's someone that the wives can live with well there, because they're not supposed to be working and stuff like that.
Imagine the experiences and the culture and everything that you learned through this experience.
Another thing is they're very religious. We would have services, and they were more for everybody, Lutherans, Catholics, and whatever. But they would have their services on Saturday. That's when they would kind of shut down, and this big sirens would go off, or the horns would go off, and they'd hear things over the speaker in Arabic and stuff like that. But one thing that I found interesting was that they always carried prayer beads around. And prayer beads, remarkably or not, this is one from over there, looks a lot like a rosary that we have. So that, and I don't know if they actually prayed with them, but all I always saw them was they were always flipping them around like this. But this was their prayer beads, and it's amazing. I don't think our rosaries get this decorative, but and this is a pretty plain one. You can get all kinds of stones and marbles and different things like that. So, but that's pretty close to what we do.
Any other cultural, things that you got to work so closely with them? Anything else that you saw culturally that you're like, maybe this is an interesting thing that maybe we should be looking more at? The school systems, or the way that they set their homes up, or
They do have schools. Their kids go to schools. They're very into their children. Soccer is the big sport over there. We'd be watching soccer games on TV. Still don't care for it that much, but soccer was big. Sports was big that way. Like I said, they're very religious. They're very good business people. I mean, money's important to them, that type of thing. It's just their way of life, and it's we learned as much as we could from them. So I think it was as bad as it could have been. It wasn't. Um, Not really. I think we kind of took it as a job, and I guess it didn't really hit me until and I'd been out with my team and we were getting properties, say housing and different things like that, areas for food, cafeterias, that type of thing, because we expected all these troops to come in. And it finally hit me one time when I came in and they said, "You're getting a special assignment. We want you to go out and secure as many refrigeration buildings or areas and freezer areas that you can." And I realized that that was anticipation. If we would have had a lot of KIAs, killed in action bodies, we were going to keep them in these refrigeration units. And they had big buildings with air conditioning and stuff like that. So they said, you can negotiate with them, you can tell us how big they are, what their capability is, but don't tell them what we were going to plan to use these for, because if they found out that there would be dead bodies in there, we'd have to buy that building, they wouldn't want it back. So that's when it hit me that this was pretty serious. Thank God it didn't happen that way. We hardly had any injuries, even when we attacked and rolled into Kuwait and stuff like that. So so that was kind of groundbreaking and kind of, here we go. We did get up to the area called the killing fields in Kuwait, where there was a lot of death and destruction from our warthogs and plane jets. People were trying to leave, soldiers trying to leave. We did get into some areas where there are fortifications, and it was pretty pathetic. They had, what you could tell by the uniforms, they were dirty and soiled and ratty looking. Their food supplies weren't good. Shouldn't say this, but one place there was a dead horse hanging there, and that's what they had been eating, was a horse. But they were long gone, but we could still see that. They drink a lot of tea, of course, and we also got up to where, into Kuwait, to where they had overtaken some of Kuwait, and that was a big thing to get that back. Of course, the fighting was all done. We just went in there to secure and make sure that things were back to normal, where property owners were getting their property back, not dealing with something like, oh, that's mine and it's not really there. So that was interesting.
How did things go with you and your family while you were gone? How did you stay in touch, and how did you...
Like I said, the Corps allowed us about a 10-minute phone call every week to call back and just talk to somebody, which I did. And I had a 2-year-old son at that time. He turned 3 when I was over there. And I remember at Christmas time, and he was still 2, my wife said, "Tell Daddy what you want for Christmas." And all I got out of him was he wanted a Mega Doodle and Home Alone. I had no idea what either one of those were. And anyway, he did get a Mega Doodle from Daddy and the movie Home Alone, which he watched continuously. And I had no idea what it was, but they were from me.
What was that transition like to come back?
We had some time off from going to work. I worked at the DOT, the Department of Transportation at the time. We had been in contact with them. There was a lot of people that worked in the Guard that, in the Army Reserve, that worked at the DOT, so they were all special. And I think Director Bacchus was there, Chief Engineer Ray Zink. I mean, they were all supportive. I mean, it was like a whole afternoon of activities and stuff where we would go and we wore some of the Arabic dresses that we had in the red area and stuff, and made it kind of fun. But because there was 2 of us that worked there, and so we did that. It was a lot of fun. Got some pictures, a lot of pictures of that. So it was good. And then after you got settled in and stuff, it was just kind of back to that normal. People would come and want to know things and stuff like that, and you talk to them. But it was getting back to normal after that. And settled in, no problem. I didn't have any ill effects or anything going on after that.
I'm sure it was great to be back with your family.
Oh yes, yeah. Friends and family from our business and stuff.
Yeah.
So. yeah, it was good.
Anything else that stands out for you during your time of this time frame, this entire time frame, the service? Anything else that kind of stand out for you?
I don't think so. There's, traveling around the country. I did get over to Korea for 3 weeks with another opportunity. Got over to Germany 3 times. So yeah, a lot of good travel in the United States, East Coast, West Coast, Texas, Washington State. I mean, it's a great place. Great time to go traveling, do your duty, and get paid. So, but really enjoyed Korea. Germany was a lot of fun, but we were busy over there with acquiring property. And at that time in Germany, that we were trying to get out of some of our properties that we had with the German government, and so we were doing what this value was, the values that we put into it, like new windows or new doors or new flooring, or how we did it, and then we wanted some of that retribution back for what we put into these buildings. So we worked on that. But yeah, I think the travel, meeting new people, and it was a good experience instead of staying home and saying you didn't go anywhere. So I think I could say I travel around the world quite a bit.
If you could do anything over, would you change anything?
I don't think I'd go active. I think I'd stay that, with the Guard or the Reserve, and still have a civilian life. I know a lot of people that are active, and they travel all over the place every 3 years, which would get hard. You always hear about the Army brats or the Air Force brats and stuff like that. So, you know about that. But no, I would do the same thing.
Well, you've achieved some remarkable things and have done and seen some incredible things, and I just want to say thank you for your service. We appreciate everything in you and your family that sacrificed and served. So,
Well, thank you, Sherry.
Yes.
I know you were part of that celebration home, so that was fun
Yeah.
too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming and sharing your story, and we look forward to seeing this all come together. So,
Okay.
all right.
Good.
Thanks, Paul.
Yep. Thank you.